So Saheda says, is it good to read Old English books or new ones? And this is a really interesting question, so I appreciate it. Now, it really depends on what your project is. What are you trying to do? What are your goals? And when we say Old English books, let's be clear about what we mean. Nobody is saying Old English as in what is called Old English, the language. This is something that very few people actually know. If I were to read an Old English sentence, I would not understand it. I would have no understanding of it other than maybe one word every 100 words, right? It's different. It's really different. Okay, so we're not talking about OLDE English. We're talking about classic books, I think. Something like, we could say, as far back as Shakespeare, maybe, or even more recent, like Sherlock Holmes, or some of those classic novels that are considered classics, like Moby Dick, right? That sort of thing. Written in a style that is not considered modern spoken English. One thing to point out is that written English is different from spoken English in a lot of ways. When you read even a modern book, as simple as Harry Potter, you're going to notice that it's not written in the way that people speak, right? The dialogue will be close to how people speak. The words that people say, the characters say in the story, will be close to how people speak in modern times today. But the descriptions of the castle and the grounds and the characters, these will be written in what's called prose, and the literary style is just different from how we actually speak day to day. So that's important to note. So whenever you're reading something, you're getting something that's not spoken English. That's the first thing. You have to be okay with that. But that's good, right? You're getting a foundation in the language. Now, if your goal is just to learn how people use English now, today, and you want to read as much as possible in that way, then you should probably read something like nonfiction, right? Nonfiction is usually written in a pretty simple, fairly conversational style, and it's not overly creative or meant to describe, beautiful images and mountains and things like that. Usually, nonfiction is written in a simple and a clear style, usually at the 8th grade level, to communicate information. And it's not to say it's totally spoken English. No. It's just easier to read than novels in the way that most prose, most fictional, let's say, prose, is written. That might sound a little weird. You might say, wait a second, nonfiction is easier to read than fiction? I think so, yeah. I think it generally is easier to read. Fewer creative, odd words used. Okay. So, yeah, if you just want to get a foundation in written English now, and you want to start something, I would recommend reading nonfiction, contemporary, modern nonfiction. If you want to get a whole picture of the language, and you want to have the same experience of the language and the same foundation of the language that a native speaker gets when they're in school, then I would encourage you to read everything as much as you can, as much as you can handle, as much as you can understand, including older literature, Moby Dick, Sherlock Holmes. By the way, Sherlock Holmes is a great series to read. Yes, there's a lot of language there that's not typical or modern, not contemporary, but you're still building up your foundation, your awareness of the language, right? Your feeling for how the language is used. Just because you wouldn't say this exactly as maybe Sherlock Holmes says it, or as Arthur Conan Doyle says it in Sherlock Holmes, just because you wouldn't say that exactly doesn't mean that you shouldn't know it and you shouldn't have a feeling for it. All of that is part of your foundation. If you're interested in setting up a foundation of the language, read whatever you can. If it's way too hard, if you tried reading Hamlet and you're reading Shakespeare and you think, what the heck is this? I don't understand. All right, skip it. That's fine. But I think something like Sherlock Holmes, maybe something like Moby Dick, or some of those older classic novels can be really, really good for setting up or helping you build that foundation, in addition to nonfiction, in addition to modern fiction, You're getting these different styles. This is your foundation. I think there's this problem that a lot of people have where they say, I'm only going to learn what I would say, right? But the thing is, what people say is not only based on learning what they would say, right? In other words, I speak the way I speak not because I've only learned the kind of things that I would say. Sounds weird. I speak the way I speak because I have built a large foundation of all kinds of inputs, including watching movies and talking to people throughout my entire life, and news, and reading articles online, and interacting with people, and playing video games, and reading books, and watching presentations, and whatever kind of input that I've had in my entire life. That massive foundation makes up my bank of what's possible for me to say. And I can't say, oh, that's not useful and that is. I can't separate out which pieces of that foundation help me and which ones don't. They're all this sort of tapestry, this thing woven together that make up my ability to say what I say, whatever it may be. And I may say only a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of what I know, but again, I can't say that's not useful, delete that one. Right? I read King Lear in high school. Delete my memory of it. No, I wouldn't do that. So I hope that, I know it's a roundabout way to say it, but I hope that kind of answers your question. It depends on what you're trying to do. My recommendation would be to read as much as you can and as wide as you can, and you'll benefit from it, even though that's a longer term project. But just picking out nonfiction and reading that, it's okay too. It's okay too. I read mostly now nonfiction, but when I was growing up, a lot of novels, a lot of classic literature in middle school and high school, and some in university as well. So I hope that answers your question. It's a great question. If you haven't already, guys, make sure you hit the thumbs up or the like button. I would really appreciate that. Also, check out my courses in the links in the description, and follow and subscribe. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments.